This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with two very special and talented people, the duo that makes up the new musical project Hibsen. Gráinne Hunt and Tim Murphy have teamed up to bring the James Joyce book, The Dubliners, to life through a special collection of songs for each story in the book. This project was born during a songwriting workshop during COVID, and now it comes to life with a new album, The Stern Task of Living, and live performances with the very first happening in Smock Alley in June as part of the Bloomsbury Festival. James Joyce will be very happy. Let's hear from Gráinne and Jim. A big welcome to Gráinne Hunt and Jim Murphy to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
Mighty. Very good, yes.
Yeah, pretty good.
And Gráinne, of course, is a veteran on the Win Happy podcast. She's been here before, haven't you?
I have. It was great.
This isn't your first race, Gráinne.
Not my first rodeo, not my first race.
I'm going to let you do the honours and maybe introduce our new guest, Jim. And by the way, later we're going to have another character joining us called James Joyce. We'll introduce him as well when, for some reason, he wasn't able to log on either, whatever's going on.
Okay, so I suppose, so I am Gráinne Hunt and I am involved in a new project, a new folk music project with Jim Murphy, who's also here this evening, and we're called Hibsen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jim, not James Joyce.
Okay, yeah. He's still struggling to log on, whatever's wrong with him. I don't know, did he get the wrong email or the wrong link or something? I have no idea, Jim. Something has gone wrong somewhere.
So I think it's worth saying, Greg, that Gráinne and I met totally by accident, and this whole project has been, I suppose, a wonderful fallout from that accidental meeting up. And in some ways, maybe fate has decided that for us. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think, Jim, that's the essence of the Win Happy podcast, where I all think we're meandering our way through our lives, figuring out at some point in time what turns us on and what turns us off, and we make decisions to change path. And I know, Gráinne, we had this big conversation with you. It's very much the same thing, wasn't it? You were this kind of musician, frustrated, doing kind of full-time jobs and all that kind of thing, but itching to fulfill who you are, really.
Totally.
And when it comes to being an actuary, exactly the same thing happened to you, Jim, as far as I can make out.
100%. Yeah, I saw, Greg, that you were an accountant yourself in a former life, so it sounds very similar. Itching is the word I would use, and that itch was there for several years until probably 2014. Sorry, forget the probably. It was 2014 that I finally made the decision to pursue music full time. I went to college, did a music degree in Dublin, in town, and came out in 2018, and since then have been pursuing, I suppose, a couple of original music projects, notably this one we're talking about here with Hibsen. Yeah.
You came out in 2018. And in a way you did, isn't it? In a way you really did. For anyone who was introduced to Gráinne in one of our earlier episodes, I kind of tried to find out something about the person and for the listener to get a sense of who this person is. So with you, Jim, can I do a little bit of a rewind and ask you the question, who the hell are you and where did you come from?
Well, isn't that the question we're all asking ourselves, Greg? Where did we come from?
Yeah.
Joking aside, I grew up in North Cork, a town called Charleville. Went to school there, well, secondary school at least, and left after my leaving cert, moved to Dublin, studied to become an actuary, became an actuary, met my wife, had kids, still finding myself. And as I say, I think the seminal point was 2012 when I actually started writing my own music. So I came to music late in life as well. I took up the guitar when my first son was born. And ironically, I found myself with more time in my hands because I was no longer socializing. I wasn't going out, and I'd be up for the night feeds and that sort of stuff, and just pick up the guitar, and it just gave me so much pleasure. And I graduated to plucking up the courage to play with somebody else in their house, and then bring it along to a wedding for the session afterwards in the bar, and then started playing in a local pub. And that was tremendously enjoyable. But there came a point where I suppose playing cover music, other people's music, wasn't giving me the same satisfaction. I started exploring writing. And yes, that was really kind of around 2012. And that brings us up to 2014 when I went to college and finished, as I say, in 2018, and kind of haven't looked back since. It's very rewarding, maybe not as financially rewarding. Again, drop the maybe, not as financially rewarding, but yeah, tremendously satisfying, I guess, to be pursuing your own thing and something you want to do. And when I say my own, I mean our thing in this case, our project, myself and Gronya.
Yeah. And that financially rewarding part, that's not a joke. You know,
No.
What age were you when you did your Leaving Cert?
17. Yeah, young enough, yeah.
Okay, and what year would that have been?
1988.
Yeah, now that was a fairly depressed Ireland.
Yeah, it
And-
was
yeah,
recession
and-
time, yeah.
Yeah, and I did my Leaving Cert in 1982, and I'm not sure what was going through your head at that time, but I know with me it was a case of Dad had been made redundant, so there was a fear about could you survive? It was a case of try to get a job and then you might have a life. And it was really, really serious. And, you know, a lot of my friends were emigrating. And you were a fool if you emigrate. If you got a job, you bloody well hang on to it, but you know, by your fingernails. And we were programmed to do that. So any notions about music or anything else or touring the world, forget about that. That wasn't how we were programmed.
Snap, 100%, yeah. I came from a large family. There were 7 of us, 7 kids. It was really tough times economically, as you say, and there's no spare cash. So it was a case of, you know, trying to get financial independence, and, you know, a job was, precious. Yeah, and it was, well, at the time I wasn't into music the way I am now, but in terms of pursuits outside of a good pensionable job, you'd be mad. That was the thinking, you know, for good reason. Yeah.
Was there music in the family?
There was, and I suppose to clarify, I did play music as a kid. It was trad music. My father plays the fiddle, still plays, and it was his passion. So we were all handed an instrument. I was given the piano accordion. As the man said, how do you play a piano accordion? With an open penknife. So we all had our instrument, but come our mid-late teens, we kind of drifted away. It didn't kind of float our boats, I guess. But it did stand to me when I came back and picked up a guitar. I had, I suppose, a musical ear programmed in.
So that was just something you did. It wasn't a passion or anything at that stage, was it? In those early days?
No, precisely. It was something we did, you know, just, you'll play that accordion.
Yeah.
And ironically, I love trad now, and I go to a lot of sessions and generally play the guitar. I play the whistle as well, but I love that side of it. There's a great energy to a good session.
Yeah, it's funny. Just before we came on this recording, I was listening to Rick Rubin interviewing The Edge about their album, and he was assuming that in Ireland we were rich with all of the Irish music, the trad, and we all loved it passionately. And he was more or less saying to Rick Rubin, well, that wasn't the case, that Ireland was a little bit of a backwater, and all that trad music was part of that dull Ireland in a way that a lot of us wanted to turn our backs on. I certainly felt that. How about you, Gronya? Did you have a relationship with Irish music, did you?
Not so much. We did a lot of sessions in pubs, sing songs, but it wasn't trad. Do you know what I mean? So when I was in my teens, we would have done a lot of sing songs in pubs. And a lot of the ballads, and there would have been a lot of Irish songs in it. Do you know what I mean? It would have been only really Irish songs. We weren't singing, Wonderwall or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? It's all like the Mary Blacks and the Woman's Heart and the Dubliners and the Furies, and it was all that. Do you know what I mean? But trad wasn't really, it wasn't really part of it at all.
Yeah, and now we appreciate it. Of course we do.
Absolutely.
So, Jim, for you, full-time job in Dublin as an actuary, doing the whole family thing and everything else, trying to pay a mortgage. When did music creep into your life again?
I guess it was my early 30s, yeah, thereabouts. And it was a gradual process. It was very much, I suppose, a recreational pursuit for quite some years. And it only became serious it's around 2012, thereabouts. When I first floated the idea with my wife that I would go to college and study music, to her credit, she said, well, why don't you? And I wasn't expecting that. So I was the one putting up well, here are all the reasons why I can't. And she said, okay, fine. But if you want to do it, do it. And it took quite some time to sort of break those down for me psychologically, because I guess, I'd spent so many years building up this career and, climbing the ladder and basically throwing all of that away. And I suppose a lot of people say you're mad. And certainly 6 months into having made the change, I thought, you're mad. It wasn't all plain sailing. There were dips along the way. But, Marguerite works full time. And, I suppose have never led kind of extravagant lifestyles. It's probably a throwback to our upbringings in the 80s. So, financially it was viable, it was doable. And, I'd say to her, I'm your hedge fund, I'm your long-term investment. High risk, high potential reward. We'll see how that works out.
So what was your win happy moment? That moment when you said, okay, that's it, handing in the notice. Was it the only thing you could do by the time it came to it? Do you know what I mean? Was it the itch was so big that it was the only choice left to you, or was it a gradual thing?
It happened very quickly. It was January of 2014. I was actually sick with, kind of a viral flu type thing for about 2 weeks. I just thought, I'm fed up with this. And I just said to Marguerite, I want to make the change. And she said, okay, do it. And very quickly, just the wheels went into motion. I come back to the fate point. I started looking at the different options in terms of music colleges. And it turned out the next day was the closing date for the BIM applications.
Okay.
So I got it in and happened to follow my feet there. And the folks I met in BIM in my year, they're super folks. I have another project with them called Bluefish Diamond, and Gráinne's met a bunch. They're wonderful folks. In fact, some of them will be playing with us, and have performed on the album. So yeah, I think I really do firmly believe things happen for a reason.
Yeah, and coincidentally, 100 years before that, someone published a book. In 1914, and there was a different thought process going on then. So the two of you, come on, who's going to pick up that story, Gráinne? Did your eyes meet across the room in a songwriting session, or what happened?
Well, actually, you're not wrong there, but it was COVID times, so we were all on a Zoom. We joined a group that was been run by sort of a mutual friend of ours. Like, I know Colm Kearney he was head of songwriting, I think, in BIM for a while. But you met him through BIM, didn't you?
That's right, yeah.
And I had met him through gigging and sessions and stuff. And he was hosting a powwow, and it was a 6-week songwriting group, and it was about co-writing. And the plan was that every week you'd be paired up with another writer in the group and expected to write something and then bring it back to the group within the week. And I think it was week 2 or 3, myself and Jim were paired together, and the prompt for that week was to write a song based on Araby from the book Short Stories. So it started with that, and basically myself and Jim met properly for the first time on a 1-to-1 Zoom call, as opposed to a 12-to-1 Zoom call as it was in the group. And we wrote the song over Zoom and over email over a couple of days, and it came together really quickly, really easily, and it was a great song. It is the first single that we released, and we didn't change it any from what we did when we wrote it in the group. We wrote it that time, and it was finished. And then, Jim, do you want to do a little takeover there and continue?
Oh, you're doing a great job, Gráinne. I agree with all of this. Yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate that it just really came very quickly and very naturally, and we kind of clicked. I think there was a chemistry there in terms of co-writing. It doesn't, co-writes are I think a tough thing to make work, but in our case, yeah, it just fell together quickly. And let me hand you back to Gráinne to pick up the thread.
I suppose, especially actually when you look at it like that, you're doing it on Zoom, because usually you'd be in a room with somebody, and you'd sit down like you'd have a cup of tea and a bit of a chat and, you know, come up with whatever you were going to do for the day. Whereas we weren't doing that. We were literally going right onto Zoom. How are you doing? Okay, right. What are we doing today? You know, and it's a really interesting way, I suppose, to write songs. But the powwow went on for 6 weeks. And afterwards, Jim messaged me and he was like, maybe we should do something more with this, you know? And then we started having other Zoom calls where we were chatting about like, well, what could we do? You know, should we write a couple more songs? Should we pick the 10 that we think are the easiest to write about, or the 10 that we think would be make good songs, or feckin', maybe we should just write the whole thing, like, you know? And that's sort of where we landed. And we essentially wrote all of the songs within, I'd say, about a 53-week period. It was just a little bit over the year from when we started. And some of them like that came together really quickly. Some of them took like a little bit more work, but it was all over Zoom. We didn't do one of them in person. We didn't meet in person until, was it May or June?
That's right. It was about 6 months.
After, 6 months after we started working together, we were able to share a coffee.
So Araby as an idea that was given to everyone in the songwriting circle as a task, was it?
Yeah.
And even that name, you know, the name of the song and where it came from. What was your first reaction to it as a topic?
I think the sort of thoughts that we had initially were there was a sort of an exoticism to it. You know, even the name Bazaar, you know, evokes images of, you know, Oriental Eastern markets from 19th century type of thing. And in fact, the story itself is based on a real bazaar that came to Dublin in the late 19th century. It was held in the RDS for a 2-week period. And I think there was about 100,000 people, Ronnie, was it, who visited it over that period.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it was, you know, it was a big event. So we were trying to capture both lyrically and musically that sort of exotic sense, that romantic notion, because the story, I guess, is about a young boy who falls in love with his friend's sister. It's classic kind of unrequited love story. And I think more generally, when it came to, you know, all of the songs, that's what we tried to do lyrically, capture the essence of the story, and then in the music, kind of the sentiment, I suppose, that's present. So some of the songs on the album would be more up-tempo, whereas Araby is a very haunting, tender, beautiful string quartet on it. And apart from that, there's just, well, let me say, just the guitar and vocals. Whereas, you know, some of the other songs have a fuller arrangement with drums and bass and piano as well, and that sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah, and the history of the song, that particular book, and James Joyce himself, were ye aware of him? Did you know a whole pile about it? Or was that the beginning of your relationship with James Joyce?
I certainly kind of, you know, I think as Irish people, we're all aware of James Joyce and Ulysses and how much of a difficult book it is to get through. That's, you know, like everybody knows, like, you know, Ulysses is hard to read, you know. But I wouldn't have been, I suppose, so aware. I certainly hadn't read Dubliners before, but it was an easy kind of transition into it, to start with something like just the one story on its own, isolated. We weren't taking it from a book. We were given the excerpt, you know what I mean? So you weren't looking at it even kind of, you had no idea how long the book was. You had no idea about anything about the other stories. You were just looking at this one piece. And then to have written a song about it, then kind of, it meant you were really entangled in it. So that next step, the Jim's idea was there. And it was like, yeah, it kind of feels like we should do this, you know? I think you had read it, had you, Jim?
Yeah, I read Dubliners about 15 years ago, I'd say. And when this project started, you know, or thinking back to it, I do recall thinking, oh, I enjoyed that. That was good. That was you know, it's very accessible. As Grania said, you know, people tend to think Ulysses when they hear James Joyce, and some people will go, oh my God, you know, eyes glaze over, sort of, so I suppose highfalutin, for want of a better term. Whereas Dubliners is, yeah, it's very, very readable. And I think we probably read it at least half a dozen times, because for each story to properly get the gist of what was going on. And what I found when we did it this time is each time we read it, I discovered an extra little nugget. It's so rich, the book, or each of the stories. It was very economic, I think, with his language choice. You know, each sentence has its purpose. there's not much fat in there or waste.
And I was doing my own little bit of research before I came on to chat to you, and even though it was published in 1914, I think he wrote it in 1905 when he was a 23-year-old. And you could just try and picture him, what that was like, living in Dublin and writing and, observing what went around him. The structure of the book and the nature of the stories and how he ended up expressing that into sounds. Could you talk about that and the content of the book?
So I guess what we decided to do early on was to, first of all, name each song after the stories so that there's a direct link, I guess, between the two, and to follow the order of the book in terms of how the album flows. Musically, if you listen to the album, it takes you on a journey where I guess there's quite a variety in the arrangements. And what I mean by that is the first song is The Sisters, which is, again, a really haunting, tender one. The second one is An Encounter, which is a rompy, stumpy, upbeat one about two lads mitching off from school. And then Araby, back to tender, then Eveline, which is a fuller arrangement and more driving and so on. So we were fortunate in some ways, just the way it fell, that musically, the sentiment we felt suited each story means the listener is kept engaged. You don't sort of feel, oh, this sounds like the last one as you go along. I'd like to think, at least. I guess in terms of the stories themselves, and I don't know if Joyce deliberately did this, but I read somewhere that first stories deal with young characters. So The Sisters is about a young boy who goes to see this priest who has died. An Encounter, as I said, is about two boys mitching up from school. Araby is that young boy in unrequited love. Eveline is about this teenage girl, who falls in love, and so on as you work your way up. And it's almost as if he's putting a mirror up to life and the progression of age. It culminates then in The Dead, which is the most famous one, I guess, which was made into a movie. So The Dead, it's almost like a novella. I mean, that is such a long story. We decided for that one, we needed to zone into a particular part of it. So we zoned into the final scene, which is where the two main protagonists, Gabriel and Greta, are back in the Gresham Hotel. And she starts to reminisce about this young man that she not so much had fallen in love with, but who I suppose who was in love with her when she lived back in Galway, in Tuam in Galway, when she was younger and so on. So I'm digressing a little bit here, but I guess, again, fate perhaps, the flow of the book leads to a lovely variety, I think, in terms of the songs, both thematically and musically, as you work your way through them.
Yeah, and Gráinne, when you have this great idea to produce an album, a song for each story, I'm sure that sounds like a fantastic idea once you start off and 3 or 4 songs in, and then you're kind of, oh my God, this is harder than we thought. Or was it that way? Did it flow easily, or were there a few of them says, oh my God?
It was interesting because, we had this idea that some of them would be easier songs to write. We had as we were kind of moving through it, there were some that we were like, oh, well, we leave that one. We know that'll be easy to write. But also we were like, oh God, we know that's going to be a hard one. So we leave that as well. And some of them that we thought were going to be hard actually weren't as hard as we thought they were going to be. I think, was it after the race, we were full sure, we were like, how are we going to write a song about this? And actually that totally came together quite easily, do you know what I mean? But yeah, it just depended. You kind of, I suppose you have this idea in your head maybe about a story. And then, because what we would do is when we finished one song, we'd discuss what we were going to do next. So we'd figure out what the next one was going to be and we'd make a decision. And we might not be coming back to see each other again, maybe for a week or 10 days or something. So by the time we were sitting down at the 10-day mark with the song or the story, we'd both have read through it and gone, right, okay, well, how about we look at it from this angle? So both of us were coming back with two kind of ideas about where we could be coming from. Sometimes we were coming with same ideas, with similar ideas, with even, this is a key line, we really need to use that. So it was interesting to see how your mind was working on the story and what you'd picked out. And a lot of the key phrases and stuff were things that we'd both pulled out to use.
How do you co-write? If you're in the rhythm of putting the lyrics together, for example, is that something you do individually, or do you do it together, or does someone take a lead from a musical point of view, or what was your process?
I suppose it probably depends on how you write in general, but when I write for myself, I'm a lyrics first music girl. That's what I do. And this is what we did as well. And I suppose myself and Jim have never really talked about this. I've never asked you, like, is that what you do yourself? Like, or what do you do?
I would typically be the opposite. I would generally get musical ideas and then I'd have a bunch of sort of lyrical sort of ideas on the go at any one time, but not completed lyrics, more themes. And then I'd feel, oh, that suits this kind of music. So for me, this was a very interesting experience doing it the other way around. And, you know, it worked very well. I think that in some ways, the fact that we had to do it online, Grania, might have sort of benefited us because it gave us time to reflect and to digest and think and then bring our ideas together. Whereas, you know, if we were meeting up in a room together, right, we have to write a song today, there'd be that sort of underlying pressure. We need to come out of this room with a largely finished song, that kind of thing. We'll never know.
If you're in a room, musically, it's easier to develop ideas together. But with Zoom and latency, it's not like if Jim's playing the guitar, I can sing along with him. That doesn't work, you know? So yeah, that becomes difficult. So I suppose what we ended up doing was we'd write lyrics, generally chorus, like we knew what we wanted, kind of we aimed for the chorus first, or if there was going to be we would discuss, I suppose, if there was going to be a chorus or a refrain or how the song structure was going to be before we'd even start writing anything. Kind of, we had all those ideas kind of mapped out. And then once we'd chorus lyric, depending on how the write was going, I suppose, sometimes we'd move straight and we go, right, we'll do some music and we'll come back. Or we'd go ahead with some verse lyrics and then we might go apart from each other and go, like, this is my idea, this is your idea, what do you think?
And Grania, is there a song on the album that you would say, yeah, that was Jim's song?
What do you want me to say, Jim?
Well, if you were to ask me, I would say, you know, it's a complete co-write.
Yeah, like I would
the
find
whole thing. It might sound glib. Very good.
Yeah, no, I'd find it really hard to look through and go, that was more, like, there might be something that might be more Jim and less Grania, or more Grania and less Jim at some point. But they're very much, when there's two people in a room, you're both working together, and it's very hard to separate those things then. Because I know, like, we talked before about how I'd written like all of Lilac's guitar melody chords, the whole structure of the song was written, and I gave it to somebody and they wrote the lyrics. You could very obviously define that James wrote that and I wrote this part, and it's two very definite sections. Whereas with this, it's so intertwined.
Yeah, and to come back to something that Grania touched on earlier, I think it's amazing how, you know, we both read the same story, and in some cases we come back with quite different observations, which I think brought a richness to us, and we were able to blend those together. No, not always. For some of the stories, we had quite similar. We zoned in straight away. That's what needs to be the focal point for the chorus or the tagline or that kind of thing. But there were definitely quite a number of them were having two sets of eyes, two different minds, I guess, interpreting them brought an extra element to it. And also, I think, challenging each other in parts on always looking to make the songs better. So, for example, Grania mentioned a chorus. There's actually a couple of the songs on the album that don't have a chorus. And we deliberately went with that because we felt, for variety partly, to keep things mixed up. But secondly, it supported more the narrative. So, for example, one of the songs is called A Little Cloud. And rather than tell the story from start to finish in the song, which is what we've done with, you know, quite a number of the songs. In that case, we decided to take the main character, and the main character, there's almost a throwback to where we started with this podcast. He worked as a clerk in an office, but he had these aspirations to become a poet. And he goes off to meet a journalist friend of his in the pub who has done it all. He's gone to London. He's led the life he wants to lead. And the clerk, you know, is envious. But as the whiskies go down and the cigars, he becomes bolder and braver. So the song is about this inner conflict. And we came up with two characters, a poet and a prisoner. And it interchanges verse from poet to prisoner. Sometimes there are verses that have both. So musically, what we did was we came up with this melody, which is supported by major chords for the poet, real happy, hopeful, and then minor chords, melancholic for the prisoner. And then it's kind of a mix almost for the verses that have both of them. So that's quite a different song, but it helps, as I say, the variety on the album. Some songs like have a middle eight, some have a refrain rather than a chorus, and so on. But it's to keep the listener's attention as you go along.
And actually, I know we talked about mostly doing words first, but there were some instances where, we'd come back with musical ideas and maybe, be like, oh, I really like that musical idea, but let's keep it for something else. So like for Eveline, we had the melody for what what the song was going to be before we had the lyrics, because the melody had been written for, I don't know I can't remember what we'd written it for before, but we ended up then just going, yeah, this is going to fit. And then you wouldn't, like, maybe we shouldn't talk about that because it does feel absolutely perfect for Eveline and it feels like that's what it was written for. But like, yeah, it's actually some of them did actually start out. And I don't think that was the only one, was it? There was another one as well, wasn't there?
A Painful Case.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So they were the exceptions in terms of music coming first and then lyrics. Yeah.
As songwriters, has that experience changed you, would you think?
So I guess it hasn't changed the way I approach the music I write for Bluefish Diamond, but I think that's because I'm doing that on my own, if you know what I mean. But it's certainly, I suppose I learned things from the process that I have built in. So my overall approach is still music first, then lyrics by and large. I remember Grania talking about a course that she had been on, and I can't remember the exact term you used, Grania, but there are sort of okay adjectives, and then there are
a 50-cent word. A 50-cent word.
Yeah. So always look for that extra bit in terms of the descriptive. Try to get more poeticism, I suppose, in this case, out of the adjectives that you use and so on. And I think that's certainly very beneficial more generally.
I think anytime you're in a room with somebody else who's doing something creative, you're always going to learn something. Do you know what I mean? And it might be something that just becomes part of your process without you even being conscious that it's happening. I couldn't say that I consciously I do things differently after co-writing online, but maybe I do.
And the name for your collaboration, which is Hibsen, Hibsen. The reason I'm calling out the letters, I think when some people hear it, they're not going to be quite sure what it is. What is it? Where did that name come from?
I guess a big influence for Joyce was a Norwegian playwright, Henrik Hibsen. He was famous for plays as opposed to short stories and so on. But yeah, he is certainly cited as one of Joyce's biggest influences. And when we were discussing a name originally, what we were aiming for was something that would be pretty short and sweet and succinct. People could pronounce it and read it if they saw it. Something that wasn't already taken on the internet, on Spotify, etc. And something that came across as kind of artistic, I guess. And we played around with a few different ones, Grania, and I suppose that one sort of just fell into place, and winner, chicken dinner.
I think picking a name for a band is always hard, or a group, you know what I mean, giving yourself a name. And I think sometimes it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? It's like you look at U2 and you go, it's not a great name, but it doesn't really matter. Coldplay, come on. You know what I mean? But like, it doesn't matter because the music's great and it's, you know what I mean? And the name is just the name and that's what it is. And nobody talks about the name really, but it's definitely, I suppose you need something, and I think having something that's got a bit of a link there. So it's Henrik Ibsen, so Hibsen. Yeah,
and it sounds a bit curious. As a name, I think it's actually very clever, in particular with the subject matter that you covered. And I was interested. So, okay, when you're asking where the hell did that come from? And I'm and I'm glad there was a story to it, because sometimes these are just makey-uppy things. We had a client one time that needed a name for their company. And it was a bit the same. One name sounds kind of nice and everything. And I don't know how many suggestions we gave them. But I was in the shower one day and I looked at the name of when you're morning, noon and night, you're trying to figure it out. And I saw the name of the shower and I just reversed the letters. And it sounded really, really cool. And that's the name of their company. And I won't tell you what it is. But if you think about the different shower brands, you might come across it. And the revealing of this project to the general public, like at the time of recording, I know there's one single and the sequence of you putting it out there and your own thought process as to why that was first, etc.?
Well, I suppose we talked a lot about like kind of what singles and what songs we might consider as singles for the record. And we wanted to go with kind of 3. And we also wanted to do them, you know, quite close together in the run up to the album release. And I feel like Araby was always in the running. Well, I feel like I kind of feel like we probably hit the 3 fairly fast, but Araby, we did move around which one might happen first just because of the way that we were looking at dates. But then it felt right with Araby being the first song that we'd written, that it would be kind of appropriate for it to be the first song that was released as well. Do you want to talk about the rest of them, Jim?
Yeah, as Gráinne said, those 3 songs, I think we landed on pretty quickly. Araby, Eveline, because there's something about it. It's very up-tempo, full arrangement, nice storyline to it, I guess. There's a romanticism to it. And The Dead, because it's the most famous one. And I think musically it stands on its own too. So it was really a question of the order. And at one point we were thinking of going with The Dead first because we were thinking of a January release. And The Dead is set on the 6th of January. But we decided against that because we felt it was just too early after Christmas. A lot of media are just coming back and so on. So we reframed our plans. I guess we both, I suppose, benefit from our own experience of releasing music in the past. And that was a great, I think, addition as well to the project, having a pooling of 2 sets of experiences and ideas. And one of the things we decided from the outset was we will allow quite a long lead time for planning in this. So we've actually had the album recorded, mixed, mastered since the end of last summer. But we spent a lot of time sitting down and coming up with our Gantt chart in sort of business speak, you know, with all the different streams of activities and high level timelines. And that got refined over time, I guess. But we had a key end date, which was June of this year, because we'd been offered a slot at the Bloomsday Festival to launch it. You know, we had, I suppose, a dialogue with the James Joyce Centre from quite early on in the project, and we'd have regular updates and so on. So, you know, once we got that, we were delighted. I guess that became, you know, D-Day for us in terms of the endpoint for the whole launch process. And as Gráinne said, we worked back then with 3 singles. The lead single with the album will be The Dead, so that'll be released at the same time. We released Araby last month, and we'll release Eveline next month.
And the name of the album, Gráinne?
For those of you who are at home, you can't see it, but Greg is getting a preview. So The Stern Task of Living.
The Stern Task of Living. Where did that come from?
It came from 2 gallons.
2 gallons, yeah.
2 gallons. So it's actually a line in the story. It's also in the story, but we also have it in the song. And we kind of had wanted something that was real and representative. We went through we went through all of the songs and all of the lyrics in an effort to try and find something that we thought would be a good title. And there were a few runners for a while, but I think once The Stern Task of Living was on the table, we were like, that's it, you know, it stood out.
Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. Growing up with simple needs, yet tinged with curiosity. A schoolboy on a summer street, until the shadows woke his dreams. Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. The sonnet eyes watched from afar, would that he could speak with her. A flood of tears confused his heart, her image filled his every thought. Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. Lost for words he followed her, a silent friend who wanted more. One day she spoke, a spell she wove. Could Araby win him true love? Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. With eastern guards in solid gold, a temple silent darkness holds, delayed by life and stories told. He gazed alone through empty cold. Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. A scorned young man returned at night, burned by anger and desire, slipped away through feeble light, for now his noble quest denied. Araby, oh Araby, from far away your mysteries. Am I too late to see your gifts? For all the leaves have died. Araby, oh Araby, exotic tales from across the seas. Will you be there if I return tomorrow at the dawn?
And the thought of bringing this on tour and appearing in front of crowds and everything. Have you actually done that, or have you done any of that in front of real people yet?
I've played The Dead quite a few times over the last sort of 6 months-ish, 6 to 8 months, as part of my set, depending on where I am, and just also to talk about the project and have people aware that it's coming. But as a group and a band, we haven't ever actually played the songs together in a real space, because when they were recorded, you know, in bits as it happens. Do you know what I mean? Like the guys who put down the drums and the guitars before I did any vocals, and the pianos and the strings were added, and that's all to come.
So the first time in front of a crowd has not happened?
No.
Not yet. So that will be at Smock Alley in June. We have 2 nights booked, Friday the 9th of June and Saturday the 10th. So yeah, we're really buzzed for it. We will play before then. We'll be rehearsing and so on. So it won't be our first time together, but you know, the recording came together very quickly as well, which is, you know, very encouraging in terms of when we do perform it. I mean, the songs, we're very proud of the songs. They're great songs, but they're not complex to play. You know, we're not dealing with sort of a jazz standards or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we did discuss the possibility of maybe doing a gig before then, but we decided no, that should be the maiden voyage for the album. That are those 2 concerts at the Bloomsday Festival, and I guess we're looking at beyond that, what other performances might we be doing down the line. So certainly we'd love to play at the likes of arts festivals and maybe do a little tour abroad somewhere at some point.
Greg, we're going to take over the world. That's what we're doing.
Gráinne, I would expect no less of you and Jim with all of these this talent and these huge ideas. Absolutely. Actually, we lost a really, really good friend a few years back. She was a lady called Jane Mass. Do you remember the series on TV, Mad Men? Well, she actually brought out a book called Mad Women. She actually worked in Madison Avenue as, I think, a copywriter, working alongside David Ogilvy, who would have written all of those kind of signature books about advertising, you know, these industry standards that everyone would have followed. So she was the kind of mad woman. Remember Peggy, that character in the TV series? She was actually Peggy in real life. So she was behind the I Heart New York campaign. Mm-hmm. You know, that kind of changed New York as being a dirty, kind of dangerous city to one we all wanted to visit and everything else. But she came to Ireland speaking at some event that we were doing. So we got to know her really, really well. She was an incredible woman, but a huge James Joyce fan. And Dee took her around Dublin visiting, you know, some of the James Joyce spots in the centre and all that kind of thing. And we managed through contacts to bring her into Leinster House for dinner. And literally by pure coincidence, I'm thinking about you were saying, Jim, and that serendipity. We actually met David Norris on the way in, and you know how integral he has been to the whole, you know, James Joyce movement in Dublin and everything. And he was so gracious with her. It was absolutely amazing. It was just a really ad hoc bumping into the two of them meeting each other just on the entrance to Leinster House, which was absolutely incredible. So we have no idea what's going on. Lots of things happen all of the time, you know. There's a bit of serendipity going on, which is really, really nice. Did you get to know James Joyce a little bit, do you think?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I guess as a kind of a follow-on from the project, I suppose, personally speaking, I've ended up reading a bunch of different books that circle around him. I suppose the most recent one was Ed O'Brien wrote a great book. It's a biography, effectively, and it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? She doesn't mince her words. She tells it straight up. And he was a complex character. He was a genius, but he was quite a dark character too. And I'd say he would have been a tough person to be in his company if he wouldn't have suffered fools badly, that kind of stuff. You know, there's a great book by a guy called David Collard that came out at Christmas. It's called, I think, 100 James Joyces. And basically it's 100 little stories about James Joyce. And some of them are quite cerebral. Some are very flippant and throwaway. But that's a great read. Gosh, I'm trying to think what else. But definitely it sparked a curiosity, I guess. And I certainly found myself at different corners looking and peering in. Is there a little bit of James Joyce in that, you know? How about you, Grania? Hogging the limelight.
Yeah, I mean, like Jim actually sent me that book for Christmas, the David Collard one, which I haven't read yet. But I suppose everyone knows James Joyce, which is what I found. Do you know what I mean? Everyone knows who he is. So anytime I'm playing The Dead, like as part of my set, I'll be like, oh, you know, I'm doing part of this project, this collaboration, blah, 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 and it's based on James Joyce's book of short stories, Dubliners. And you get in this, you know, in the room, there's just this, like, so he's in so many people's lives. You know what I mean? And it's a great way to connect with people in a new way, even though you're connecting with them anyway. Do you know what I mean? I suppose there's a common thread. They're like, oh, well, I've read that too, and she's read it, and they've done this project. Yeah, I suppose it's just fascinating, really.
And do you like him?
Yeah, like I do want to read more, but I also feel like I need to like pace myself. Am I going to start reading Ulysses? Probably not. But like maybe Finnegan's Wake, or you know what I mean. Just get something else in. Although, who was I speaking to recently? It was like, actually, Ulysses is not as bad as everybody thinks. You know, you just have to like take it in short doses, you know, just like don't, you know, it is because it's physically big, you know.
Yeah, well, that could be the next album, can't it? Quite logically, it'll take you 20 years to produce, whatever. Have you a favourite child on the album, Grania?
Oh, I suppose the fact that I played The Dead probably is a sign of something, you know what I mean? But like, I do love Eveline. I do love A Painful Case. I do love A Mother. It'd be hard to pick one, you know?
But you have to. The ship is sinking. You can only bring one with you.
Well, for this moment right now, I'm going to say The Dead.
Okay. Go on, Jim. Go for it. Your favourite child.
If I had to pick one, I think it would be Araby, because it's not just for the song. I think the song is very strong, but I suppose it's, for me, it was the start of the journey. I can still remember that sort of 48-hour period over which we wrote the song. And, you know, we were both really invested in it. And that was a great thing too, because sometimes, you know, in these workshops, you get paired up and people have different expectations and, in fairness, different commitments and, you know, in terms of time availability. But I could see straight away Grania, you know, was really up for this. I'd hardly got off the Zoom call and she sent me an email. Okay, are you free to meet or not meet, but have a phone call at 8 p.m. this evening, that kind of thing, and so on. And it was super. And I remember sitting back after we had written it and thinking, wow, you know. So whenever I hear it, that comes to mind. But as I say, I think it's a terrific song as well. And the production is just gorgeous on it. It really captures the sentiment.
Yeah, fantastic. What's happiness to you, Jim?
To me, well, I think music is happiness. I guess the journey I've been through, I see things through a different lens now. I think I see life. For me, it's kind of simple enough things insofar as if my kids are happy, I'm happy. They're 21, 19 and 16, going on 17. And they had a tough couple of years during the pandemic, each at their own stage of life, really tough. And yeah, if they're having a good day, I'm having a good day, I guess. It might sound glib, as I say, but, going back 10 years ago, for me, if you'd asked me that question, I'd probably be thinking commercial success is happiness, and that's not to knock that. I think that has a place in life, but, the idea of getting a promotion or, moving on up the ladder and so on might have been what I would have thought has been more happiness. But it's having a balance in life. It's having the space to pursue what I like to do. And, I have remarked to Marguerite, God, I feel I live a charmed life, and I am very lucky and I recognize that. But I try to use that time to recognize the time I've been given and sort of, I suppose, the opportunity and to make the most of it, I guess. And this project, I think, is a testament to that. I'm not joking when I say music is happiness. I constantly have music in my head. And I've come to realize that now, where I didn't recognize it 20 years ago. It gradually pulled me in, I think. If I'm walking down the street and a lorry rumbles by, I'll hear some music in that, or if people are chatting on the bus, there's a rhythm, a cadence, and I'll hear something in that. And, sometimes it'll spark an idea that I'll make a note of and come back to at some point in terms of writing. But yeah, it's living life to its fullest, having that balance in life, and yeah, everything just being in sync. That's happiness.
In a way, Jim, did you make more room for music? Because, I'm thinking as that career type person crawling up that ladder, and we're all fully charged trying to get there. And of course, the higher up you go, when you get there, you realize you look left and you look right, and you think, this isn't the lovely utopia that I thought it was. And when that penny starts to drop, maybe in your case, you gave music that space to come back into your life,
Yeah, well, I guess to put flesh on that, when I left for probably a year afterwards, I would regularly get sort of an email or a phone call, because I'd ended up working in a consulting role, from people asking would I be available to do a bit of contracting work, just in a project here or there. And it was tempting, especially when I had those kind of low moments where I thought, what the beep have I done here? But I just decided, no, if I do that, I'll get sucked back in. And also, I'll have less bandwidth to do what I want to do. And, I'm very glad I made that decision. So I do have that space for music, and I juggle it between this project, my Bluefish Diamond project. I'm getting guitar lessons. Grania put me onto a great guitar teacher. So always trying to improve, I guess, and in the other box of time I have available for music, it's trying to work on new songs, new material.
Fantastic. And just to close off with you, that process of collaborating with Grania from the first minute you started songwriting together at this most unusual time during COVID. I'm not sure if we're ever going to see anything as bizarre as it again in our lifetimes. I'm not sure. Would you have a little magic moment in all of that time?
Well, for me, I think probably the greatest moment in some ways was when we came out of the studio and we felt we've done it, and we listened to the tracks. We thought, oh my God, we've realized the vision, I guess, that we had for those. There were lots of lovely moments along the way. There were some moments as well where it was a hard slog in terms of having to roll up the sleeves and deliver and get stuck into a story that wasn't as appealing a story as others. But that moment, I remember, Grania, I don't know if you remember this, but we got a string quartet in who feature on probably half the tracks, and they were the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle on the recording. So we had a day booked at the end. They came into the studio, and their reaction, I remember thinking, oh my God, they loved the tracks. And the funny thing was, the day before I got an email from the contact person, and we had sent the tracks off like a month beforehand, and the scores and all that kind of stuff, which were arranged by a guy called Cormac Curran. But she emailed me the day before and said, oh, I just want to clarify, I just want to check, are we recording with the Dubliners, or are you doing covers of their songs?
Oh, God.
to go from there to the complete other end of the spectrum where they were raving so much, and Beth, who was the lead person, said, we would love to perform these songs with you. And we said, perfect. So let's come back to you with dates for the launch and so on. And they will be performing at the launch. So for me, that was the pinnacle, I guess, of the whole thing. What about you, Ronnie? Would you agree?
Yeah, like I can't remember what song it was, but I absolutely cried when some of those strings were being recorded, like when they were being played back to us in the room, when the control room, because they were so beautiful. And everything else at that stage, pretty much, apart from maybe some of the piano stuff, I think, had been laid down. So the tracks were almost complete. You know, not mixed or anything, but you were getting the songs with these amazing, like, swell suddenly appearing and these arrangements that were so beautiful. And suddenly the songs really felt complete. And just like that, sometimes that just makes, like, it just bubbles up from inside you and falls out your eyes, you know? And like, yeah, I totally cried because it was so beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, like, if this can make people feel this way, you know what I mean? I know what's coming. No, I was part of this. I know what to expect. And it's making me feel like this. So, you know, if we can get people to have those feels, that would be amazing.
So I have one last job for you, Gráinne. Pick another song from the album to close off and why you've chosen it.
I suppose we should probably do Eveline because that's the next single. So it's going to be out on the 14th of April. So I don't know how that falls with dates or whatever. But that's the next single. And that is one of the songs that has ridiculously beautiful string arrangements on it. And it's also something that's got a little bit of there's extra sounds going on in there too, which I think really add to the scene of the song, you know. It really sets it. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Fantastic.
I say so myself. So.
Jim and Gráinne, thank you so much. Every bit of deserved success to the two of you. Two great people. I've known Gráinne for quite a while. She's fantastic. And Jim, she's picked a good Corkonian to team up with. So fair play to you. You know how to spot them, Gráinne. That's all I can say.
What can I say?
Yeah. Thank you so much to both of you.
Great. Thanks a million.
I remember the day I first saw your face at the house on the road. I was stood by the gate. Then I'd meet you outside the stores every day and see you home. Your father's upset. You met a sailor man, so we met in stealth and we made a plan. And then you were scared that he might raise a hand, 'cause he's angry as hell when 3 sheets to the wind. Time to escape, I'll give you new life in Buenos Aires. I'll make you my wife where the sun it shines, where we can be free, sweet Eveline. Come away with me. For so many years I sailed on the seas, happy to roam wherever I please. And then I met you, fell head over heels, and now the time's come to settle, my dear. speedboat to America's south, through the Straits of Magellan, where the future is bright. Time to escape, I'll give you new life in Buenos Aires. I'll make you my wife, where the sun it shines, where we can be free, sweet Eveline. Come away with me. Here we are now in the sway of the crowd. It's time to board as the boat blows its horn. Chaos abounds, chaos abounds. Come take my hand, heavy it's time. Quick take my hand, for the boat blows its horn. Chaos abounds, chaos abounds. I know you're afraid, but it's our last chance. Time to escape, I'll give you new life in Buenos Aires. I'll make you my wife, where the sun it shines, where we can be free, sweet Eveline. Come away with me.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.